Thank you so much for being here. I am Emonee LaRussa. I am a two-time Emmy Award-winning motion graphics artist and director. According to Google, I am one of the top motion graphic designers, but according to my mom, I am the top motion graphics designer. But I think it's only because she doesn't know any other motion graphic designers. So I started my career straight out of film school, working as a cinematographer and motion graphics artist at CBS News at 21. After that, I began working in the music industry, creating animated graphics and concert visuals for artists like Meg Thee Stallion, Lil Nas X, Kanye West, Her, Christina Aguilera, and many more. But with the music industry's small budgets and insanely fast turnarounds, and I mean fast, if they ever contact you needing graphics, just know that they need it done by yesterday. So there's that. But for those reasons, I started to push more towards ads and brand work, working with companies like Saturday Night Live, Adobe, Intel, the Grammys, and many more. Truthfully, I change what I want to do for the rest of my life every 2 years. To me, it feels like an existential crisis, but to clients, it shows versatility, so that's great. So leading into the opportunity of a lifetime creating motion graphics for the Super Bowl. So the big question is, how did I get this gig? I was contacted by the visual director and producer at Production Club, which is an amazing studio based in LA. They asked me to direct and animate the introduction team graphics for the Super Bowl. But let's rewind. How did they get my contact info? This dates back to 2021. I'd worked on a lyric video, and the producer on that project recommended me to another director, who then hired me to create the visuals for Meg Thee Stallion's BET performance. During that trip, I met another artist, who later that year invited me to an artist dinner. That's where I met Darren Graneri, who just so happened to be the visual director and producer at Production Club. Full circle. This is why it is so crucial to not only focus on the craft, but also nurturing genuine connections with other people. That's why events like this are so incredibly important, not just meeting people with the hopes of getting a job, but creating genuine relationships. So moving back to the ask. So they had asked me to direct and animate. They had given me a deck with all these beautiful colors and concepts that focused on this neon light aesthetic because this year's Super Bowl was going to be in Las Vegas. I'm like, cool, awesome, sounds great. What's the catch? They dropped the bomb on me that we have 3 weeks to create original graphics with full animations for the screens up here, big screens. These two back screens over here, you could see the little tiny people right there. And these ribbons that go across the stadium. And let me just tell you, these resolution sizes were insane. 24,544 by 224. Here's the best part. We don't know the final teams until 2 weeks before the Super Bowl. So that meant I needed to be very strategic on how I was going to plan for this time crunch. First, I knew I could focus on the animation, knock that out just in time, but I needed an even faster illustrator. That's when I connected with Lena Vargas, who, in my opinion, is a real-life superhero. Not only is she one of the most creative and efficient illustrators I've ever met, but she's a mom, too. Right? One of the biggest things I've learned in my career is that you cannot be amazing at everything. It is so much easier to focus at what you're great at and hire people who are amazing at what you aren't. This allows my craft to shine, and I get to connect and create with other talents that expands my creations. So, as a director approaching a deadline like this, there's a few key things that need to happen in order to avoid under-delivering. Communication is number one. Because there are so many pieces at play, everyone needs to be on the same page. The reality is, when you are working with big name brands and musicians, most of the time, you are playing a big game of telephone. Someone is telling you to tell someone to tell someone to tell you what they want. So clearly outlining expectations on art style and direction is so crucial. There should be no assumptions on what the final should look like. Also, as a director, the communication between collaborators is so important. I want to create a safe environment for collaborators to ask questions. I would much rather you ask me too many questions than not enough. There should be no feeling of dumb questions in the room. Here is one of my processes. I love using Loom. I'm also dyslexic, so I like being able to use video chat. Number 2 is preparing for preventative measures. In a perfect world, there would be no revisions, but realistically, we have to expect that with all this communicating that we're doing, someone's not going to know what's going on. But you have to expect to be proactive and instead of reactive and prepare to expect for that. For this project, it was so important not to create any destructible workflows, but rather create placeholders in case something needed to be replaced. So knowing this measure, I needed to adapt our normal workflows, and yes, it did take more time in the front end of the project, but it saved us so much time in the end because there ended up being a lot of revisions. Lastly, a preventative measure I took was creating rough animation tests. Doing tests are absolutely essential whether you're on a time crunch or not, but for this project, it was so incredibly important because it not only showed them what they could expect for the animation, but it also gave me a better understanding on how long each animation was going to take to make. The next thing to implement in your workflow when you are having a tough deadline is structure in your work-life balance. If you find yourself absolutely destroyed during or after a project, a lot of the time it has to do with how you're managing your work time and just your living and existing time. The fact is, if I am not feeling 100%, I am not performing at 100%. So I have a very strict structural system to create healthy habits when working on a big project. So one thing I use is a Pomodoro timer, which Pomodoro, I believe, means tomato in Italian. So it's a study technique that helps with cognitive functions and higher levels of concentration. And it does this by giving you short intervals of works and breaks. So you work for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. Also, doing things like stretching, meditating, drinking water, things that feel like duh, but it's so important to be intentional about this structure when you are working on a project like this. So now, let's hop back into the pre-production process. So first, Lena and I met to discuss the objects and the composition. We needed to distribute the objects equally amongst Vegas, football, and team-related things while making sure that it still felt cohesive in the composition. We put together this list, and I put together references in the mood board to get a good feel for this neon light aesthetic. Once we came up with the rough ideas, Lena created these rough sketches for client approval. Then she would create cleaner sketches for us to give to production club. Once they approved, we would then give those back to the NFL. Once they have approved on that, we will take that back, and Lena will create this in Illustrator. Then I would create the animations for client approval. So these are some mock-ups. Keep in mind, though, we still don't know who the final teams are. So everything you see here is just mock-ups for teams that we were hoping were going to win. And when I tell you, I have never been so invested in football in my entire life. I was like, is the game on? I was like slowly turning into my dad. So the first team that we thought were going to win, we're like, ooh, the Eagles, let's prepare for that. They don't make it. And then we're like, oh, okay, the Ravens, I saw a video on TikTok predicting it. They're definitely going to win. They don't win either. And if you're wondering if this was all a waste of time, no, because apparently one of the directors at the NFL made this their screensaver, so. But in all seriousness, creating these mock-ups were not a waste of time because we were able to reuse the Vegas and football things in there, so it was still productive. So last part of pre-production, and in my opinion, one of the most critical foundational things needed day one is team building. And I hope out of everything that I say today that you grasp the importance of this. As a director, it is integral to ensure that you create an environment that feels good and motivates your team. A project like this can build so much pressure and stress, so making sure that your team knows that you have their back, and if there's an opportunity to make it easier on your team, that you do it. A lot of times, I have run into artists feeling like they need to be too cool for school, just being very straightforward and to the point in order to be taken seriously. But I have found that being very intentional about being positive and trying to be a team player only has great outcomes. And I'm saying this because I rarely hear that in this space. Your goal as a leader should always be finding a way to make it easier on everyone else around you, even when that means more work for you. So check in, send some love, buy some lunch. It will definitely make a project so much easier. So moving into production, once all of our final compositions were approved, our workflow consisted of me animating while Lena finished up the composition for each of the screens. We are about 2 weeks out from the Super Bowl, and we know that the Chiefs and the 49ers are playing. Although we did a lot of preparation to avoid revisions, there are so many stages of approval that delayed us from getting it out sooner. But we have put so many safeguards in place, so we were able to get revisions out relatively quick. So here are some of the rough sketches that were created. Lena did amazing. And here is the final composition for the 49ers. And here are for the Chiefs. A lot of 49er Chief fans in here. A way that we were able to get the revisions out pretty quickly was by keeping the Illustrator files as editable layers in After Effects. So if we needed to change out the color or the icon, it was as easy as overwriting the file in After Effects. The animation process on a technical level was pretty straightforward. It was just very time-consuming because there were so many moving parts. So here is the final animation for the 49ers. It looks beautiful on the screen. Here was the back screen graphics. And then here are the ribbons that go across the entire stadium. So fun fact, the ribbon that's higher in the stadium is actually a few pixels larger because they want the proportions to look the same from the perspective on the field. So now you know. And here are the animations for the Chiefs. So these are all looping animations to kind of fit that neon light aesthetic. And then here is that back screen. Overall, I was working 8 to 12-hour days to get these animations completed, but I'm really happy with the way that they came out. Once it had aired and I saw my graphics, I just got so emotional because honestly, this was one of the most fulfilling projects I've ever worked on. I felt so happy to be able to work with Lena again, who is such a great person and even better artist, which I don't even know how that's possible. And I feel so grateful that I could even get an opportunity like this that I could bring her on. I felt so honored that Production Club trusted me and allowed my leadership to shine. It really made me feel proud, and as an artist, that is very rare. Also, you have to understand that I come from a family of generations that would never have dreamed of being at the Super Bowl, and yes, I made it in the nerdiest way possible, but a win is a win. Thank you. To have this opportunity was just indescribable, and I hope I can continue doing this and create more opportunities for people like me. Thank you so much.